Today's daf is daf mem zayin, and we'll start on the second line from the top. We're talking about the pasuk in Parshas Kedoshim, v'chiyogur itcha. And why did the Torah add the word itcha, b'chol makom, to teach us that we can accept gerim anywhere, she'itcha, meaning anywhere on the face of the globe, even in chutz la'aretz. The Brisa clarifies, in Cain, if we have the word v'artzechem, that seems to indicate that we don't accept gerim in chutz la'aretz. And we just derive from the pasuk itcha that we can accept gerim anywhere on the face of the earth. So what do we do with the pasuk v'artzechem? Ma Talmud lomar. What does the Torah mean when it says v'artzechem? What's bedafka in Eretz Yisrael? And the Gemara answers, Be'eretz Yisrael tzarich lahavi raya. In the land of Israel, if the ger comes forward into a bezdin and he claims that he underwent gerus somewhere on the face of the earth, then he has to bring a proof. He's got to adduce witnesses to testify and support his claim that he had a valid gerus somewhere in a bezdin. Otherwise, we're afraid that maybe he's lying and he wants Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael is described as Eretz Zavas Cholav Udvash, and there are many milas to Eretz Yisrael. He wants to live in the land. He wants to eat from its fruits. And he fabricates this lie to say that he was Mizgayer Bebezdin Kedin. But chutz la'aretz, on the other hand, ain't tzarich lahavi raya. If a non-Jew comes forward and he says, well, I was Mizgayer, then we're not going to suspect that he's lying. He's believed to testify about himself without even bringing witnesses that he was Mizgayer. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who accepts a leniency outside of Eretz Yisrael. Achamim omrim, they disagree. Bein ba'aretz ubein b'chutzah tzarich lahavi raya. We always suspect that perhaps he's lying, and that in truth, unless he adduces evidence, witnesses to testify that he had a gerus kedin, we're not going to rely on his own claim that he was Mizgayer in a bezdin kedin. The Brisa now is taken under scrutiny, and the Gemara is going to analyze the Brisa. We said in the Brisa that the extra words v'chiyagur come to teach us that in bohu v'edav imo, if he brings two witnesses to testify on his behalf that he was Mizgayer, then we accept him. So the Gemara asks the obvious question, Kra Lomali, why do we need a pasuk? He's got two witnesses. We're relying on the witnesses. We don't need his own testimony. Amar Rav Sheshes, what is this pasuk? Ki Yagur teaching me. The Amri, it's a situation in which the Edom don't testify that we saw the gerus, but Shamanu, we heard, Shenis Gayer bebezdin shel ploni. So this is called Edus al pi shmua. They heard that from others that he had a gerus. They never actually saw the gerus, they didn't witness the gerus. They weren't in bezdin at the time that supposedly the gerus took place. And this pasuk is teaching me that even such a secondary kind of testimony is acceptable. And we if not for the extra ribuy of chiyagir, we would say, why believe Adam that are testifying based on mipi shmua? Kamash Malan, the Torah is machadish us that this testimony is relied upon. It's nemenis, and that's based on a principle that the Rosh formulates called Gilui Milsa Bialma. In other words, they're not testifying on the action itself, the act of gerus. All we need is a Gilui Milsa, some sort of an indication that there was a gerus. And the fact that two Edom testified that they heard that there was a gerus, that's a strong enough indication to qualify as a Gili Milsa, and therefore we rely on their testimony. The Brisa says, Ba'artzachem, Einli Ela Ba'aretz, Bechutzatz Minayin, Tamalomer Itcha, Bechol Mokom She'itcha. So we derive from this pasuk, Itcha, as we saw earlier today, that the Gerus can take place anywhere on the face of the earth, and it's not limited to the land of Israel. The Gemara asks, Va'pikte. We already used the word Itcha for something else. And that is that Ein Makablim Ger, unless, based on his own testimony, unless he's muhsak that he's a Ger. So how can you now turn around and use the same word Itcha to derive another additional halacha that even in Chutzlar, a person is relied upon to say that he was miskayer? The Gemara answers, Chada me Itcha, v'chada me imach. There are two different psukim in two different parshas in the Torah. In Parshas Kedoshim v'chiyagur Itcha, and later on, at the end of Sefer Vayikra, we have a pasuk in Vayikra Perek Chav Hey, Ger v'soshav v'chei imach. Imach implies b'chol makom. So from the word itcha, we're going to derive the conclusion that the ger has to be muchsak lanu shu ger. And from the word imach, we derive the conclusion that anywhere on the face of the earth, even in chutzatz, we can accept ger. The Brisa quotes the Shita of the Chachamim. Chachamim bein baretz bein b'chutzatz tzarich lavi raya. We don't rely on his own testimony about himself, neither in Eretz Yisrael, not even in chutzatz. V'ela haksiv ba'aretz. The pasuk seems to indicate that this is a special halacha that requires dafka aretz, and it only applies in the aretz. According to Chachamim, this halacha of adducing evidence to support his claim applies bein baretz bein b'chutz la'aretz. So what did the pasuk say? Ba'aretz, b'aretzam. What's it teaching me? And the Gemara says, we need that pasuk. Afilu be'eretz Yisrael mekablim gerim. There was a havamina that there was no leniency, no license to accept gerim in Eretz Yisrael. Why is that so? He's not motivated for sincere reasons to become a ger. He wants to enjoy the benefit of Eretz Yisrael. Machmas tov Eretz Yisrael. That's not a real sincere desire on his part for gerus. Maybe we shouldn't accept gerim in Eretz Yisrael. And hashta nami now, even bisman said the lekatevusa. We don't really see and experience the shvach of Eretz Yisrael. We don't have cholav udvash. Nevertheless, Ika, there still is some element that makes Eretz Yisrael very attractive on the face of the earth, and that is because we're obligated in Eretz Yisrael through the mitzvahs of Zerayim to support the Aniyim, Leket Shikhu Peah Meiser Sheni, Meiser Ani, and therefore perhaps for those extra reasons, the special benefits for the Aniyim in Eretz Yisrael, he wants to come and be Megayer, but Megayer, he's not really sincere about it. Kamashmal, no, the Torah says, Ba'aretz, to teach me that even in Eretz Yisrael, despite those extra milos of Matnas Aniyim, nevertheless, we're not going to be Chochesh, that he's insincere. We're going to Mekabel his Geiros, even in Eretz Yisrael. Amar Rav Chiya bar Rav, Amar Rav Yochanan, Halacha, Bein Ba'aretz, Bein B'chutzatz, Tzarich Lavi Raya. And that means that anywhere on the face of the earth, even in Chutz La'aretz, the Chacham insists that he, the ger who comes to claim I was misguided, has to adduce evidence. Pshita Yochid v'Rab Maloch Karabim. Rabbi Yehuda was the one who said that in Chutz he doesn't have to prove it, but the Rabbanan rejected it. So we always paskin like the Rabbanan. Yochid v'Rab Maloch Karabim. Mal Detema, the Gemara says, I would have thought that maybe in this case we should pass like Rabbi Yehuda against the Rabbin. Why? Because mistaber time of the Rabbi Yehuda, the pasuk seems to support Rabbi Yehuda. Why is that? The Komisayele Kroy, the psukim of Imach, which indicate that we are makabel gerim anywhere on the face of the earth, that would certainly include Eretz Yisrael. And therefore we ask ourselves the question, given that the Torah says Imach, why did the Torah write B'Artzachem? It must be to teach me that there's something special and unique about the requirements and the laws of Geirus in Eretz Yisrael, and that is that in Eretz Yisrael, he's got to prove his claim that he was misgayer, and that's B'Artzachem. But in Chutz La'aretz, Rabbi Yehuda is right. There's no need for him to prove his claim that he was misgayer. Kamash Balon. Rabbi Yochanan wants to tell me that even though the psukim seem to indicate the view of Rabbi Yehuda, nevertheless, halachas kachamim, because Rabbim against the Yochid. Tana Rabbanan, we learned in a brayso. At the beginning of Chumash Dvarim, it says, "Ushefatatom tzedek ben ish ubein achiv ubein gero." So the word mishpat, together with the word ger, these two words appear in the same pasuk. Mikanom Rabbi Yehuda, ger sheniskayer bebezdin areza ger beino veinatzmo eno ger. Just like mishpat, which is dini mamanos, that requires a bezdin of shlosha, so too gerus requires a bezdin of shlosha. And if the gerus took place in the privacy of his own house, his own room, that's not gerus, that's not mishpat. A man comes in front of you, he says, Niskayarti beini levein atzmi, which is an invalid gerus. Now, we had assumed that his gerus was a good gerus. Or alternatively, we thought that it was a Jewish family. And now he's casting an aspersion on himself and on his whole family. Amalo Rabbi Yehuda, Yeslecha Edim, do you have witnesses to testify on your behalf that you were misgayer? Amalei Lav, I don't have any Edim. I was me in the privacy of my home, my own room. Rabbi Yehuda asks him, Yeslecha Banim, do you have children? And these children, again, Amuchzakim ki Yisraelim ksherim, we don't know otherwise. Amalo Hein, I have children. Amalo, Nemanato liv sol tzasmacha. You're not going to be allowed to marry a Jewish girl because by your own admission, you are a guy. Because there is no gerus that's valid unless it was done in front of a bezdin. But Iata Neman lifsal spanecha. You have no power and authority to passel them. So we'll split the sentence into two ramifications. We'll accept the sentence as far as the ger himself, who's now not a ger because by his own admission there was no valid gerus. But as far as passeling his children who have a cheskas ksherim, that he's not believed. So the Gemara now asks the following question: a person is not believed to passel his banim, and now we're going to get into a sugya called Yakir, which is a pasuk in the parsha of Bechar. For Asanya, we learned in the brayso, the Torah says Kiyas HaBechar ben Asnua Yakir. Okay, that's in Dvarim Chaf Aleph, beginning of Parshas Kiteitzei. And what does the extra word Yakir indicate? And the Gemara says that the word Yakir teaches me that if Bezdin doesn't recognize this person, and certainly doesn't recognize who the Bechar is amongst the brothers, amongst the sons, the Torah invests authority in the Av, Shiakirenu Lacherim. He'll testify on his own children and he will point out which is the Bechar. And that Bechar will now receive a double portion of the inheritance. Mikan Om Rabbi Yehuda, Neman Adam Lomar Zeh B'ni Bechar. A person, a father, is believed, he's trusted to identify which son is the Bechar, even if we had assumed that was the chazak of the general assumption that another brother was older and was the Bechar. Furthermore, Rav Yosef adds, Ukshem sheneman lomar zeh b'ni Bechar, kach neman lomar b'ni zeh ben grusha, ben grushu. So let's say in the case of a Kohen, he identifies his son as a ben grusha, meaning that he, by his own admission, was a Kohen who illegitimately married a grusha. This is the son of that marriage. Now, a Kohen is born to a grusha as a chol. He's asal mikahuna. Alternatively, another example where the father is never to pasel his son, the father's a Kohen, O ben chalutzu. This is the son of a chalutza. And the son of a chalutza is a cholol midrabanan. The Rabbanan made gzeira chalutza to nisua. A father is not believed to pasel his sons and to say that his son is a ben grusha ben chalutza. His son has a cheskes kashrus l'kahuna, and that's where it'll stand. But you see clearly that Rabbi Yehuda holds neman adam lifsol esbana. But why then did he tell that ger that he's not believed to pasel his bana? Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, according to Rabbi Yehuda, a person is believed to pasel his bana, and that's all included in the pasuk Yaakov. But here, hachikam, this is what Rabbi Yehuda is told to ger. By your own admission that your gerus took place in the privacy of your backyard, and there's no gerus, therefore, is oved kol chavamat. You're a guy, according to your own admission. The ain edus lovik kol chavim. You cannot undermine the chazaka of your children as Yisraelim Ksherim because you're a guy, and a guy's pasal yedus. That's the opinion of Nachman bar Yitzchak. Now we have an alternative opinion of Ravina. Ravina Omar Hachika Omar Le. This is what Rabbi Yehuda said to the ger. Yesh lecha banim, hey. Yesh lecha b'nei banim, that we didn't have. Do you have any grandchildren? Hey, I have grandchildren. Amalei, Rabbi Yehuda says to the ger, Nemanata lifsol banecha. The Torah only gave you nemanus vis-a-vis your own children. And that means your children when they don't have any children. But in a case of grandchildren, and if you're not believed to pasel your grandchildren, then maybe you're not believed to pasel your children. The Torah only believed the father with regard to his children, but not with regard to his grandchildren. And therefore, if he has grandchildren, he's not believed to pasel even his children. We're not going to be machalik and say, well, we're going to believe him as far as the children and the psulim, but the b'nei banim aksher. That's impossible. Tanya nami hachi. The Gemara now quotes the Brisa to support Ravina. Rav Yehuda Omer neman adam lomer al b'no katan v'ein neman al b'no gadol. What does that mean? The Omer Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Omer Rabbi Yochanan, lo katan mamish, v'lo gadol mamish. Don't interpret the Brisa literally that when a father is neman on his son, it's only because he's a katan, meaning he's less than 13 years old, or he is not believed when his ben is more than 13 years old, he's a gadol, but rather, Ella, this is what the Brisa has in mind. Katan, the yeshlo banim, Zeu Gadol. If his son, about whom he's testifying and disqualifying, has children, that's called a Gadol, and he's not believed. The father is not believed, not even on his own son. Since he's not believed on his grandchildren, he cannot be believed on his children. But Gadol, no matter how old he is, but v'ein lo banim, he has no children, zeu katan. And that's where the Torah gave him, the father, credibility to disqualify his children because there are no grandchildren. So he's believed to testify on his children, no matter how old his children are, even if they're above bar mitzvah. And that clearly indicates Ravina. But then the Gemara says, that a father is not believed to passel his son and testify that I underwent gerus in private, because given his own admission, he's a guy and he's not believed on himself. Ein edus l'nachman. So immediately the Gemara says, how could the Gemara paskin like Rav Nachman? Hatanya kavasid Ravina. We just quoted a brayso to prove Ravina that the father is believed to passel his children as long as he doesn't have grandchildren. So when he testifies that his gerus was in private and therefore was not a gerus kidin, and he's a guy, how can you paskin halacha like Rab Nachman bar Yitzchak against the brayso? And the Gemara answers, who that brayso, which says that the father is neman to passel his son if his son doesn't have grandchildren, doesn't have children, that's not relating to the credibility, the nemonis of a father to be made on his bno, on his ben, that the gerus was an improper, invalid gerus and passel his son. For that he's not neman, because hilchos hakavasei Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak lidvarecha akumata, you're a guy. So by your own admission, there's no evidence. We cannot rely on your testimony. But rather, the subject of the brayso is le'inyan yakir itman, that a father is believed to be makir his son and to testify this is the bechar. And just like he's neman, he's believed to say this is the bechar, this is my bechar. He's also believed to say that this son is a ben grusha or ben chalutz and passel for kahuna. And that's where the brayso gave nemanus and recognized the credibility and the reliability of a father to testify about his son, who's a cut, meaning he doesn't have any children, to the exclusion of b'no hagadol, because the Torah only believes him as far as b'no, but not as far as ben b'no. But with regard to the issue of gerus, where the father testifies that the gerus was not a valid gerus, we're going to completely disregard his claim. We're going to paskin halacha like Rab Nachman bar Yitzchak lidvarecha, by your own admission, you're a guy, and ein edus l'nach. Tana Rabbanan. Now, from this point and on, we're going to be studying the laws of the actual Maaseh gerus. Ger sheba lizgayer b'zman hazeh. He comes into Beis Din, this guy, and he wants to be misgayer. Omrim lo, we say to him, and we're trying to basically dissuade him from becoming a ger. And we say to him, Mara Isa Shebasal is Gaia, don't you realize what you're getting yourself into? Are you oblivious to the fact that Yisrael Bisman has said today, the Jewish people in exile, the Tfuyim, the Chufim, they're completely lost, they're subjugated, Chufim, they're Shfelim, they're Kfuyim, Mitorafim, Mebulbalim, Isurim Boim Alehem. And now together with your, if I look at your people, your nation, they're successful, they're up there by Mila. That's what you want to do? If the ger responds, Yomi Yodani, I'm aware of all that. I know that the Vuyim, the Chufim, Schufim, the Eni Kedai, and yet I feel myself not even worthy of participating in their sorrows. I only wish I could be zochet to be part of the Jewish people. Lishtatev ima b'tzarosam. It's mekablan also miyad. We immediately accept it. We see that Choshka Nafshko, he's like Rus, and he really has sincere desire to become likonis tachas hashchina. He's not motivated by some sort of external pleasures and benefits. And we're not going to delay because, as we'll soon see, ein mashinas ha-mitzvahs. Umodian also, we go on and we tell him, wait a second. Do you know what you're getting into here? Forget about the zigzag of Jewish history. Let's just talk about mitzvahs, your new obligations for which you're going to be held responsible. Modino so miktas mitzvos kalos, miktas mitzvos chamuras. We give them a little test, a little test case, sort of like a sample of the easy mitzvahs and the more severe mitzvahs that require a tremendous amount of work and tircha. So a mitzvah kala could possibly be something like shiluach hakan, or maybe other mitzvahs that are relatively simple. They don't require a tremendous amount of tircha. And then we get to mitzvahs chamuros, which probably includes something like Shabbos and kashrus and taras. And why are we trying to dissuade the ger? We'll see the Gemara number days. Koshim gerim liyisrol kesapachas. And beyond this, v'chein modian also avon leket shikhu peo maseh. The Torah requires us to give matnas aniyim. And these mitzvahs are spelled out here because we're going to see that a ben Noach is neragal pochs mishav pruta, because the ben Noach is makpid on all of his mama. And now we're telling him that by joining the Jewish people, he's going to have to give his way his mammon for the adi. That should dissuade him. Umodian also onsham shal mitzvahs. The punishment for violating the Torah, omelo have yodesh achlo basal midizu before you were miskayer. Achalta chelev, you could eat chelev. Iatonish kares. Chilalta Shabbos iatonish skila. The action of now you coming to miskayer achalta chelev on his kares. You'll be punished with kares, chilalta Shabbos on his skila. So we tell him, we notify him about the onshim of mitzvahs. Maybe he'll begin to appreciate the weight of the mitzvahs. He'll be poresh, and he'll drop the ball, so to speak. He won't be miskayer. I'm out of here. We don't want him to walk away with a feeling that this is a terrible religion. We have to tell him about the schar itself. In Asiyas HaMitzvahs, he's zocher l'chai olam haba. And even though there's no tzaddik gomur, but a bal chachma who can understand the mitzvahs, who can analyze the Torah, and he does these mitzvahs, he fulfills them, and he gets to a level of Yedias Hashem, for which he's going to get Olam Haba, V'yomer lo have Yodea, she'olam haba eno asui ela, excuse me, l'tzadikim, B'Yisrael b'zman hazeh, and the first one, you know why it says b'zman hazeh, and it means that in our time, there's the Yetzer Hara, and Einam Yecholim L'Kabel, you should know in our time with the Yetzer Hara, here on Daf Mem Zayin Amud Beis, Lo Rov Tova, for Lo Rov Puranius. We won't get too much good stuff because the pasuk says in Dvarim Lamed Beis, Vayishman Yeshurun, Vayivat, Avisa, etc. You'll become so fat and opulent with all the great things that God bestowed upon you. That's going to take you the wrong direction. The Yetzer Hara is going to try to be machti him from Rov Torah. Rov Tova, he'll be Yorim Levavo. He'll make all sorts of mistakes. He'll lose his schar in Olam Haba. We don't want to give him too much raw either, too much peronios, because he'll just lose this world. If you give a Jew too much peronios, he might just cease to exist. He might expire from this world. So you should know that the other nations of the world will be destroyed. They'll reach their finito, but Yisrael nisharim kayomim liolam. Netzach Yisrael lo yishake.